Hello and welcome to Real Cheating Story. My wife Audrey and I met during our freshman year of college. She was incredible to me, tall, around 5 feet 11 inches, with brownish blonde hair. I've always had a thing for tall, slender women, and she was exactly my type. Slim, with a toned figure and an amazing smile that lit up her whole face when she looked at me. People would often joke that they could tell we were thinking about each other by how much we smiled when we were together. In the early days of our relationship, our physical connection was intense. We spent a lot of time together, and the chemistry between us was undeniable. There was one day when we couldn't seem to keep our hands off each other. We were inseparable, starting early in the morning and continuing throughout the day. As the years went on, we were still connecting several times a week, although by our final year of college, we were both swamped with schoolwork and things started to slow down. That's when Audrey made a mistake. His name was Brad. Brad was the center forward on the basketball team, a towering guy at 6 feet 9 inches. One night, a lot of people started messaging me with photos from a party. In them, Audrey was hanging all over Brad, and then there was one of them kissing. A friend even sent me a video of Brad leading her into his room with a smile on her face. I was furious. The next day, I went to her place. She was still asleep when I arrived, and when she woke up, it was clear she was badly hungover. I showed her the photos, and she admitted what happened. At least she was honest. She explained that she'd started drinking, met Brad again, and they ended up hanging out. Things escalated, and before she knew it, they were alone in his room, and the night had spiraled out of control. She apologized profusely, telling me she only loved me and that it was a stupid mistake that wouldn't happen again. Audrey pleaded for forgiveness, saying she would do whatever it took to make things right. All our friends and even some of my buddies said it was just a drunken mistake. But I stayed angry for nearly 2 weeks before I eventually forgave her. I couldn't deny that we had built something strong, and I hadn't been without her for that long in years. But I made it clear, if anything like this happened again, we were done. Audrey was lucky to get this one chance. Years later, I look back and realized that the friends who told me to let it go because she was so attractive are mostly stuck in unhappy relationships, while those who told me to prioritize trust over looks are all happily married. Faithfulness means so much more than just being with someone beautiful. Audrey and I moved on. After college, I landed a job as a programmer, and Audrey started working as an admin for a large company. We got married, had our first child, Matt, the following year, and his sister, Marcy, the year after that. Life was going well. Audrey transitioned into real estate, and with her looks and confidence, she quickly moved into selling high-end homes. Her income soared, but so did her work hours, including weekends, and our intimacy declined again. I couldn't help but remember what happened the last time this pattern started, and within a week, I had monitoring software installed on her devices. I wasn't about to take any chances. I had installed monitoring software on her smartphone and placed a voice recorder in her purse. 2 days later, I caught recordings of her with some guy named David. The GPS on her phone showed they were at his apartment, across town from her office. My heart felt shattered, like a man drowning, desperately searching for something to hold on to. I clung to the fact that they never expressed any emotional attachment, no I love you, no sweet words. It felt like there was still a chance for me to save our relationship, for the sake of the kids. When she got home, I made her favorite meal, and the kids were dressed up nicely. I showered her with attention, and she seemed to enjoy it. I told her how much I loved her and that we needed to spend more time together as a family. She agreed, and I felt hopeful, like I had a chance to win her back. I began texting her pictures of the kids throughout the day, and whenever I saw her texting David, I'd send her a message saying I missed her. I was thrilled when she told David she couldn't meet him on Wednesday. That Friday, I arranged for my brother and his wife to babysit the kids while I took Audrey to a 5-star restaurant. We had dinner, danced, and later, tried to break our personal record for intimacy in one evening. We didn't quite make it, but it was fun trying. The next day, we picked up the kids and spent the day at a water park, enjoying time in the sun as a family. Life felt good, and I thought we were on the right track. But on Wednesday morning, her text to David shattered me all over again. Looking forward to seeing you. I missed you. My wife had been living a lie. I wasn't going to listen to any more excuses. I wasn't about to let her try to explain which parts of our life were real and which weren't. As far as I was concerned, Audrey had already abandoned me and the kids. I caught a glimpse of David when she took her phone out. It was one of her coworkers I had met before, someone who had given me a bad impression right from the start. I briefly considered confronting him, but I decided against it, knowing that my focus needed to be on getting Audrey out of our lives. She had been lying to the kids and me for too long. I would take advantage of every weak point in her double life, aiming to gain custody of the children and secure as much as I could in the divorce. I wanted our family and friends to see how she had chosen her lover over us. The next week was Marcy's band recital. I casually mentioned it to Audrey when I knew she wasn't paying attention. The day before the recital, I used the monitoring software to move the event reminder on her phone to the day after. At the school, I checked to ensure Audrey was at David's apartment and that her phone was set to silent. I left a message asking where she was. An hour later, I called again, reminding her she was late. She called back in a panic, asking if she'd missed Marcy's performance. I told her she just had, though it wasn't true. Marcy was upset on the drive home, wondering why her mom hadn't shown up. I reassured her and Matt that sometimes adults get caught up with work. It seemed to satisfy them, but I could see they were hurt. When we got home, Audrey was waiting, still dressed in her work clothes, though suspiciously fresh. She tried to make it up to Marcy with affection, and after a couple of hours, Marcy hugged her, telling her not to miss the next recital. I wondered if Audrey felt genuine remorse or if she was simply worried about being exposed. It became a pattern, Audrey missing important events, then trying to cover up her absence. I also noticed that she and David would meet at a small restaurant on the outskirts of town. It was known for its Scottish eggs, and one day, I found myself discussing them with my father-in-law, who remarked that he hadn't had a good one in years. I got into a conversation about Scottish eggs with my father-in-law, and he mentioned that he hadn't had a good one in years. I told him about a restaurant I knew, and made reservations for Wednesday, the day Audrey and David frequently went there. I picked up my in-laws and took them on a scenic route, checking my phone to see that Audrey was still at the office. Halfway there, I noticed her phone moving towards the restaurant. We arrived a few minutes after her. As we walked in, I saw Audrey sitting at a booth in the back, right next to David. Loudly, I asked my in-laws, "Do you want to sit in a booth or a table?" Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Audrey's head jerk up, her eyes widening, and she quickly scooted to the other side of the table. David looked confused at first, but when he noticed us, he tried to hunker down. Audrey jumped up and came over, greeting her parents with a big smile. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" she asked. Her dad, still smiling, replied, "We heard about their amazing Scottish eggs and thought we'd stop in to try some." Audrey leaned in to hug him. "They're great! Why don't you sit with us? My coworker and I are just over there." She pointed to the booth where David awkwardly waved back, his face flushed. The smiles on both her parents' faces faded. Audrey's dad stepped back, taking his wife's hand. Her mom, no longer smiling, looked at David and said flatly, "Well, we wouldn't want to interrupt your business lunch." Audrey, trying to sound upbeat, replied, "No problem. We're just grabbing a quick bite before I show a property." The lunch was awkward. Audrey did most of the talking, while my mother-in-law stared at her food, frowning. Her father, who had smiled when he first saw her, now said nothing, his gaze locked on David. I kept the conversation light, asking David how long he'd been working with Audrey and why a nice guy like him wasn't married yet. My favorite moment was when I suggested Audrey introduce him to her single sister. "If it works out, we could be family," I said, watching Audrey's strained smile. David, after an uncomfortable silence, finally replied, "No thanks. I have a girlfriend." I asked, "Really? Anyone we know?" David smirked and said, "She's in a complicated situation right now, so I can't say." He glanced at me with that same smug expression, but it quickly vanished when he realized everyone at the table was glaring at him, especially Audrey. Our food arrived, and the in-laws, who usually ate slowly, finished quickly. I barely touched my meal. Audrey noticed and asked if something was wrong with the Scottish egg. I simply told her, "I've lost my appetite," and stared at her. Her mother signaled for the waiter and handed him a $100 bill, paying for everyone's meal. She quickly excused herself, heading for the restroom. Audrey's dad picked up the change, gave David a hard look, and followed his wife without saying a word. I stood up, saying, "Sorry we interrupted your business lunch. I'm sure you have plenty to discuss and sell." Audrey chased me to the car. "We can talk about this at home," she said. "Your parents will be out in a second." Glancing over her shoulder, she saw her parents practically running for the door, not even looking back at David. She sighed and added, "I guess that would be best." Her parents gave her a quick, emotionless hug before getting into my car. The drive home was silent. When we arrived at their house, I got out to say goodbye, as I usually did. Her mother hugged me tightly and said she loved me like the son she never had. Her dad gave me a sideways hug and told me to bring the kids over soon, he missed them. As I watched them walk to their front door, they seemed older, more fragile. I felt sad, knowing that Audrey's lies had hurt not only me but her parents too. It reminded me of her sister, Karen, who had been disowned after 2 failed marriages due to infidelity. Karen had been lying to her parents about her second husband, who was actually a decent man, claiming he was cruel and unfaithful. This charade ended when a friend sent Audrey's parents a video of Karen kissing a married man in a restaurant booth similar to the one David and Audrey were in. Audrey's parents had known the married man's family since childhood. Audrey's mom and the married man's mom had been lifelong best friends, closer than sisters. The fallout was disastrous. The married man divorced his wife, leaving her and their 3 kids, and moved across the country. Audrey's parents' friends, devastated by the betrayal, left the church they had attended their entire lives to avoid the in-laws. They never spoke to them again, even though Karen lived in the same town. Audrey's parents hadn't spoken to Karen since. Anytime Audrey tried to mention Karen, they immediately cut her off, reminding her not to bring up her name. Karen had once attempted to sneak into their church during a Sunday sermon. Upon realizing Karen was there, her father stood up in the middle of the pastor's speech, apologizing to the congregation as he and his wife left, using the door closest to Karen without acknowledging her presence. The entire congregation followed suit, staring at Karen with disdain as her parents walked out. That evening, Audrey came home with what she thought was great news about the lunch with David, boasting about how it had secured a large sale for them both. I told her, "Audrey, going to lunch alone with an unmarried man is inappropriate. I don't want you around him anymore, and I definitely don't want you going out to lunch with him again, even in a group." Audrey, sounding apologetic, replied, "Honey, I'm sorry if that's bothering you. I won't go out to lunch with him anymore. Don't worry, we got the big sale." I told Audrey I would be sleeping in the guest room until she apologized properly to me and her parents. "Your parents were upset. Remember how your sister got caught cheating?" I added. Audrey was visibly shaken at the mention of Karen, but told me I was blowing things out of proportion. On the plus side, I now had an excuse not to share a bed with her. Next, I installed a kill switch in both Audrey's car and David's car. I did it while David was busy with Audrey at his apartment. While I was at it, I also tampered with his transmission sensor to trigger the engine light, just to mess with him a bit more. That weekend, we had a typical divide and conquer day. Matt had a soccer game, and Marcy had a band competition across town. Audrey, as it happened, decided to spend that afternoon with David. I disabled her car remotely while I was at Matt's soccer game and listened in live from her phone. Knock, knock, knock. "David, what's up, babe? Back so soon?" "Audrey, my car won't start." "David, let's take a look." 15 minutes later. "David, I don't know what's wrong. Your battery is charged, and the lights are coming on, but it's not starting. Want me to give you a ride back to your house?" "Audrey, no, you idiot. After the restaurant incident, if my husband saw you drop me off, it would be a disaster. Call a tow truck. I need to pick up Marcy for her band competition." "David, can't your husband take her? He's at Matt's soccer game, right?" "Audrey, we planned for me to take her." "David, you can take my car again." "Audrey, fine. Take me to a car rental. We'll get a tow truck and you'll pay the driver $50 to drop the car off at our work address." Just then, Audrey's phone rang. Me, are you on your way to get Marcy? Audrey, I'm having car trouble. I think it's the battery. Me, want me to swing by and give you a jump? Audrey, no, I've already called a tow. I'll just rent a car, so Marcy won't be late. Me, alright, call me if you need help. I hung up, listening as Audrey told David to drive her to the Avis near our work. Needless to say, Audrey was late picking up Marcy. Luckily, Marcy called me in a panic, and I was able to arrange for a friend to take Matt home so I could get Marcy to her competition, barely on time. When Marcy and I got home, Matt was already in his room. Audrey was waiting, ready with her apology to Marcy, still in her work clothes but freshly showered. Audrey, Marcy, I'm so sorry. My car wouldn't start, and I couldn't pick you up. I got a rental, but by that time, Dad had already picked you up. Marcy, frustrated, it's fine, Mom. I made it to the competition on time, thanks to Dad. But this is the second time you've missed one of my recitals. I hope work is worth it. Marcy stormed off to her room. Audrey, turning to me, tried to explain, it wasn't my fault. I had car problems. I replied, I called your office after lunch. They said you'd already left for the day. You had over 2 hours to get Marcy. What happened? Audrey froze and stopped breathing for a few moments, but then she regained her composure. I had some errands and thought I had plenty of time to get them done. I didn't know my car would stop working. I looked her in the eye for a few seconds, watching her fidget slightly. When she realized what she was doing, she stopped and stared back at me. What errands were you running? You never mentioned anything to me. Nothing, just some stuff, things I needed to do. Well, I hope that those things were more important than your daughter's love because you're on thin ice with that stunt, I said before walking up to the spare bedroom where I had been sleeping alone. At least now I had the answer to a question that had crossed my mind. Audrey didn't seem to care about missing our kids' events, her priorities clearly lay elsewhere. If she truly cared, she would have rescheduled her day instead of using our daughter's event as an excuse to get out of work early and spend time with him. Later, the mechanics couldn't find any issue with Audrey's car. Marcy, however, couldn't resist pushing her mother's buttons. Hey Mom, remember you said you'd take me and my friends to the mall this Saturday? Can you let me know now if you don't want to take us? We don't want to be stuck while you're out having car problems again. From the other room, Matt laughed loudly and added, Good one, Marcy. It was becoming evident that the kids were feeling neglected. Audrey actually had the nerve to whine to me afterward, asking me to speak to the kids about how they were treating her. I'll consider it, Audrey, while I'm still waiting for your apology in the guest room. She didn't like the irony and got upset, blaming my decision to sleep separately on my stubbornness. Saturday came, and I ended up taking Marcy and her friends to the mall. Audrey claimed she had work to do, but her car stayed at a house for a couple of hours instead of going to work. I looked up the address, it was listed for sale. When we got home, Marcy made a big show of thanking me in front of her mother, emphasizing how much she appreciated me taking the time. Audrey, clearly frustrated, tried to ask me about it, but I just chuckled and locked myself in my office. Matt's birthday party was coming up, and I found a bowling alley that had 6 lanes available on a Wednesday night. When I told Audrey about it, she seemed uneasy. Wednesdays weren't convenient for her, apparently. I needed her to pick up the cake and candles while I got the kids and other guests. The week of Matt's birthday, I had to disable his car 3 times to prevent their meetings. That Wednesday, Audrey sent a text saying she was looking forward to seeing him after lunch. I saw her GPS moving toward his apartment, plenty of time for her to have some fun and still make it to the party. Meanwhile, I had my own plans. I went to pick up a special present for Audrey. After confirming she was at his apartment, I placed a pet cage covered in black cloth by his door and used a door breaching ram to smash it open. I quickly made my way back to the rental car and, after driving off, connected to Audrey's phone microphone. The sounds of chaos filled the air, screaming, shouting, and even what sounded like gagging. Clearly, the skunk had done its job. I could hear him vomiting, a good sign that he'd been hit with the skunk's perfume. Through the commotion, I caught him telling Audrey to call the police. I took the opportunity to lock her phone remotely, making it seem like she had entered the wrong code in her panic. Desperate, he had to go into the living room to grab his phone. The moment he opened the door, the skunk sprayed again, and the yelling resumed. Eventually, he managed to call the police, telling them that there was a wild animal in the apartment and that they needed help. 15 minutes later, the police arrived. Seeing signs of forced entry, they entered the apartment with their guns drawn. Unfortunately for them, the skunk struck again, sending them into fits of coughing and retching. It took a couple of hours for animal control to arrive and remove the skunk. When things finally calmed down, two smelly police officers sat across from Audrey and him, equally drenched in the skunk stench. More officers had arrived, but after catching a whiff of the scene, they quickly left. One cop asked, "Who lives here?" He raised his hand. "I do." Turning to Audrey, the officer asked, "Do you live here?" "No, I was just visiting." "Do you have some ID?" "Is that really necessary?" Audrey replied, clearly exasperated. The officer, not amused, snapped back, "Listen, I just got sprayed by a skunk and vomited for 5 straight minutes. I'm not in the mood for games." Audrey handed over her license. The cop continued, "So how do you two know each other?" "We work together." "So, what were you doing here?" "We came by to pick up some papers." After confirming their identities, the cop asked, "What was the skunk doing in the apartment?" He started to explain, but Audrey quickly interrupted, "It was a birthday gift, for me." "A full-grown skunk? As a birthday gift?" The cop sounded skeptical. "He's not my boyfriend." Audrey snapped. The officer, clearly frustrated, responded, "Boyfriend, girlfriend, coworker, whatever. Why would you buy a full-grown skunk as a birthday gift?" "I didn't know it would be full-grown. It was supposed to be young and neutered, so it wouldn't spray. He told me he liked skunks and wondered what it would be like to have one, so I thought I'd surprise him." "Expensive gift," the cop said dryly. Audrey tried to downplay it. "Not too bad. You buy expensive pets for all your coworkers, or just your boyfriend?" Audrey didn't answer. "Boyfriend it is," the cop said. "And what about the door?" I accidentally broke it yesterday and hadn't gotten around to fixing it yet." The officer stared at them both in silence for a long moment before saying, "You're both full of it, but I'm done with this smell. The only reason you two aren't getting arrested is because you both stink worse than me and my partner. I'm not putting you in the back of my squad car smelling like this." With that, I heard the door slam shut. After the police left, he turned to Audrey. "What was that all about?" Audrey, trying to stay calm, said, "We couldn't exactly tell them someone kicked in your door and threw a skunk inside." "Why not?" "Because they would have questioned my husband if he was behind it. If he did it, he already knows. If he didn't, then they would have to tell him I was here." Audrey sweetly asked, "Be honest, how many other women have you been seeing?" "None," he protested. "When was the last time you were with someone besides me?" "About a month ago," he mumbled. Audrey's voice rose. "You jerk. How long had it been going on?" "About 8 months." Audrey, now shouting, said, "You were seeing her the whole time we were together?" "There was another one about 6 months ago," he admitted. "Were their husbands aware?" she demanded. "Yeah, both did." "And they knew it was you?" "I'm not sure," he replied, clearly uncomfortable. Audrey sighed. "Great. So now I'm positive it was one of their husbands seeking revenge. Either way, I'll find out if it was my husband. If it was, I'm going to make him pay for this," he muttered. Just then, my phone rang. It was Audrey. "Have you picked up the cake yet?" I asked, knowing she could hear the sounds of bowling pins crashing in the background. "I got caught up with work. I'm leaving right now." "Don't let Matt down too," I said. "Don't worry, I'm leaving now." Audrey hung up, and I heard her rushing to get ready. Once she was halfway to the grocery store, I remotely shut down her car again. After a few frustrating attempts, it finally started, but not without several more stops along the way. By the time she reached the store, she was running very late for Matt's party. When Audrey arrived at the store, I overheard her apologizing to the bakery staff, explaining that she'd had an encounter with a skunk. They quickly helped her get on her way. By the time she made it to the bowling alley, the party was nearly over. As she walked in carrying the cake, the smell hit us all hard. We all covered our noses, gagging from the stench. After a quick conversation, Matt, clearly embarrassed, begged his mom to just go home. On the drive back, Matt asked me, why is Mom always missing mine and Marcy's events? I tried to reassure him. She's doing what she thinks is best for the family. Sometimes it's hard to be in two places at once. But you're always there for us, and you make more money than she does, he said, clearly frustrated. Well, I have more flexible hours, which makes it easier for me to be with my two favorite little skunks in the whole world, I joked. Marcy piped up from the back seat. Not funny, Dad. It will be when you tell all your friends about it at school tomorrow, I teased. Even the birthday cake stinks so bad we had to throw it away. Birthday stink cake, they both chimed in, laughing. I was grateful to be sleeping in the guest room that night. A few days later, after Audrey had taken several baths in tomato juice to get rid of the smell, I saw her leaning into my car, sniffing all the upholstery. Watching her was hilarious. She looked like a mouse sniffing around for cheese. Quietly, I followed her upstairs and peeked around the corner as she checked the closet. Using my phone, I recorded her as she dropped down on all fours, sniffing my shoes. I never asked her why her car didn't smell like skunk from the outside. 2 Saturdays later, I told the family I had to run some errands at the hardware store. After asking if anyone wanted to come along and receiving the usual uninterested grunts, I headed out alone. Instead of the store, I drove straight to his apartment. His car was there, a good sign. I knocked on the door, and when he opened it, I pushed my way in before he could react. Can I help you? He asked nervously. I think we can help each other. I'm Audrey's husband, I said, taking a seat at the kitchen table. His face went pale as I invited him to sit with me. The smell of fresh paint still lingered, along with the faint odor of skunk. The furniture and carpet were clearly new. I know you've been seeing Audrey for over 6 months, I began. He tried to deny it, but I cut him off. Would a few pictures and a video of your Wednesday get-togethers help jog your memory? His face flushed. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the act. I have proof, I continued, leaning in. What matters to me isn't you. It's my wife. So, here's the deal. Instead of hiring someone to take more incriminating pictures, I thought I'd offer you money instead. He looked confused. You want me to videotape? Yes, you and Audrey. It would be worth $2,000 to you, I said bluntly. He stared at me, processing what I was suggesting. Glancing around at his newly furnished apartment, he finally spoke. $2,000 for a tape of me and Audrey? Are you serious? Yes. The video must show her face, body, and everything. I'll also need a signed consent form from you stating that you created the video and authorized its sale to me. Why do you need the video if you already have proof? He asked. I need more leverage for the divorce. You cheating with her on camera would seal the deal. He shifted uncomfortably. That's cold. Cold? You mean like how she's cheating on me and her kids? After a long pause, he muttered, yeah, like that. $2,000, I repeated, and I won't tell the other 2 husbands whose wives you've been with. His eyes widened. The other 2? Yes. And to sweeten the deal, I'll even pay for a spot at a hotel and spa a couple of towns over. You can spend all day with her there next Saturday. He hesitated, then nodded. $3,000, and you've got a deal. Fine. No mention of this to Audrey. I'll handle the hotel reservations and send you the consent form today. We'll meet again the following Monday. I left his apartment and finally made my way to the hardware store. Wednesday evening, I casually mentioned to Audrey, honey, I've got a conference out of town this Saturday. Will that be a problem? No, she replied. Looks like it'll be a slow weekend anyway. Have fun. The following Monday, I called him and told him I'd pick him up from his apartment. Suspicious, he asked why. I don't want to end up in any videos myself, I explained. I drove him to a secluded rest stop off the interstate and had him step out of the car. I scanned him with a metal detector, just to be sure, then had him get back in. "You have what I want?" I asked. "Yeah, here it is," he replied, handing me a thumb drive. I plugged in the thumb drive, and the video began playing. The camera appeared to be sitting on the dresser at the foot of the bed, initially showing the bed empty. Then, the man lay down on his back, and soon after, Audrey entered the frame. She moved between his legs, and though the angle was discreet, Audrey's face was clearly visible throughout the scene. In the next clip, the camera shifted to show a side view of the bed. Audrey, completely naked, climbed onto the bed, and some suggestive dialogue followed. The final video showed them together in various positions, but again, the focus remained on the overall setup rather than explicit details. I turned to him and said, "Perfect, exactly what I was looking for. Do you have the consent form?" He nodded and pulled an envelope from his jacket, handing it over. I opened it and checked the date and signatures, ensuring everything was correct. I took a quick picture of the document and sent it to myself for safekeeping. Then, I pulled an envelope from the side door panel of my car and handed it to him. He grinned as he counted the money, satisfied with the deal. As I dropped him off at his house, he quipped, "If you ever need another video, just let me know. Easiest money I've ever made." I didn't respond, but his words left a bitter taste. The following Tuesday, I sat down with my brother and his wife to explain everything that had been happening. I showed them a brief, heavily redacted clip of the video and a few still photos, ensuring the most sensitive parts were omitted. I also shared a timeline of dates, highlighting the family events Audrey had missed while she was with him. Next, I spoke with Audrey's parents. Again, I kept the images and videos heavily redacted, showing only their faces and legs, sparing them from the more explicit parts. I didn't want Audrey to lie her way out of this with them. After that, I asked if they were aware of her obsession with shoes, which clearly puzzled them. I played a video of her sniffing every pair of shoes I owned. This, surprisingly, disturbed them more than anything else. The infidelity, they seemed to grasp, but the shoe fixation threw them off entirely. After that, I noticed all the shoes in their house disappeared, and their bedroom door remained shut whenever we visited. I showed the same evidence to my parents. My dad found the shoe-sniffing video amusing, laughing out loud. But I asked them to refrain from interacting with Audrey until I gave them the go-ahead. That Wednesday, while Audrey was at her boyfriend's house, I sat the kids down to explain the situation. "Mom has a boyfriend," I began gently. "I'm not sure if she loves me anymore." Their faces filled with shock, and they immediately asked if we were getting a divorce. I explained that I'd be discussing everything with her when she got back. They both exclaimed, "She's with him right now?" I confirmed this and pulled out my phone, showing them the GPS tracker I had on her car, which was parked outside his apartment. Marcy was the first to connect the dots. "Is this why she's always missing our events?" she asked, her voice tinged with hurt. I nodded, showing them a timeline of all the days their mother had missed important family moments, with each absence highlighted. They both started crying when they saw how late Audrey had left his apartment to make it to Matt's birthday party. I hugged them both tightly, reassuring them. "The most important thing is that I love you. This is between your mother and me, and we're going to do everything we can to stay a family." After about 30 minutes of crying, hugging, and talking, we heard the front door open. Audrey walked in, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, looking at the kids' tear-streaked faces. "Kids, why don't you go to your rooms while your mother and I have a conversation?" I said. They each gave me a big hug before throwing their mother a dirty look as they left the room. Once I heard their doors close, I turned to Audrey and asked her to sit down. "Audrey, I know you've been having an affair." Her eyes widened, and she immediately denied it. "Oh God, no. That's not true. I would never cheat on you. Why would you even say something like that?" Her voice cracked as tears welled up in her eyes. I remained calm. "Audrey, if you're not going to be honest, then this conversation is over." "There must be some mistake," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Someone must have thought they saw something, but it's not true." "All right, Audrey. We're done for today. Take the rest of the day to think about what you're doing to this family. We'll talk again tomorrow. In the meantime, don't speak to me or the kids until we've resolved this." I stood up and walked to the guest room. Audrey followed, pleading with me, but I shut the door in her face. Moments later, I heard her quietly trying to talk through Marcy's door. "Marcy, this is all a mistake. Please, open the door so we can talk." Marcy didn't respond, but she texted me, "Can you make her go away?" I replied, "I'll try." I opened the door and looked at Audrey. "Please, leave the kids alone until we work this out between us. You're making this harder for them than it needs to be." "But I want to know what you told them," she replied. "I told them the truth, that you have a boyfriend. Other than that, it's between you and me until we figure this out. Now, please, leave the kids alone." Audrey gave me a sad look before walking to her bedroom. I heard her sobbing quietly for the rest of the night. The next day, Thursday, I was sitting at the kitchen table when Audrey came home. The kids were out with friends, not wanting to be around. "Audrey, please sit down." She sat across from me. "Have you thought about what you're doing to this family?" She nodded. "Are you willing to have an honest conversation with me about your affair?" Again, she nodded. "So, what do you have to say for yourself?" Audrey hesitated before speaking. "This is all a misunderstanding. Yes, I've had an affair, but it's only been emotional. I've had a few lunches with him, even though you asked me not to. But we work together, and it's unavoidable. I've confided in him about some of my feelings, but that's all. Believe me, I love you and only you." I sighed. "Well, since you think your best option is to lie your way out of this, we're done for today. I'll talk to you again Saturday morning at 9 a.m. The kids will be staying at my parents' house tonight and tomorrow. Until then, take the time to think about what you're doing to this family." I got up and went to the guest room. Audrey didn't follow. Saturday morning came, and I had breakfast with the kids at Audrey's parents' house. When I got home, Audrey was sitting at the kitchen table. "Are you ready to have an honest conversation about your affair?" Audrey nodded. "You told my parents about this?" "Yes." "You told your parents, your brother, and his wife too?" "Yes." "How could you do this to me?" I asked. "I've always worked hard for our family, but now, all your hard work has gone into lying, to me, to the kids, and to our parents. How could you stand there and look us all in the eye while hiding the truth?" Audrey's voice trembled. "I only kissed him a couple of times, that's all. You've turned everyone against me. You turned them against yourself with your lies," I said. "Since you still won't be honest, this conversation is over. The kids will be staying with their grandparents for the time being. I'll be staying in the guest room and working from home. We'll talk again on Tuesday. Take the time to think about what you're doing." I left the house and didn't return until after dinner with my parents and the kids. Audrey was sitting in the living room when I walked in. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Tuesday," I replied, then headed to bed. That night, I received a few texts from Audrey's friends, asking me to forgive her. They claimed it was an innocent mistake. I called them on FaceTime and calmly explained how many months Audrey had been seeing the other man. I showed them an unredacted picture and a short clip of a video. Both friends quickly apologized and hung up. I never heard from them again, and I doubt Audrey did either. On Tuesday evening, Audrey came home, and I walked out of my office to find her sitting at the kitchen table. She had brought pasta from our favorite Italian restaurant and had a plate ready for me. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. In a pitiful voice, she said, "No one will talk to me." "Lying will do that," I replied. "They think I'm a monster." "Well, Audrey, you've shown them that part of you isn't who they thought you were." She continued, "They said you showed them a picture and video of me with him." "Yes, I did." "No one will show me the picture." "Can I see it?" "If it helps this conversation move forward, yes. But just so you know, I haven't let any other copies get out. I don't want our family ridiculed because of your choices." I showed her the unredacted picture and the video. "I love you so much," she said tearfully. "Can't we just let this mistake go?" How strong was your love for me that you felt the need to be with someone else? I never loved him, Audrey said. Marriage is pretty simple: shared responsibilities, shared trust, and shared happiness. I took on 100% of the trust, responsibilities, and joy with you. I stared at her for a moment. You left me with most of the financial responsibilities, most of the family responsibilities, and all the burden of trust while you were out having your fun. Audrey looked down, speaking softly. I'm sorry. How long have you known? 7 months. Why did you wait so long? At first, I hoped it was a one-time mistake and that you'd be honest with me, admit your wrongdoing, because, as you keep saying, you love me. I'm really sorry. How can I trust what you're saying now? Because I love you, and I'm telling the truth. Is this the same truth you told me during our last 3 conversations when you denied ever having an affair? Audrey stayed silent for a moment, staring at her food. Then she finally asked, what can I do to make this right? I stood up and went to retrieve an envelope from the home office. I placed it on the table in front of her. This is a post-nup agreement. Sign it, and I will consider taking you back. You, I, and the kids will have to go to therapy to try and fix this. Audrey looked up, shaken. I don't want to sign a post-nup. Fine, then we're done. As far as I'm concerned, you just want to get back together so you can get out of this marriage financially better off. What do I get if I sign it? She asked quietly. If either of us files for divorce, I get 70% of everything. If I'm caught cheating, it goes back to 50-50. If you're caught cheating, I get 85%. In all cases, I get full custody of the kids. Have an attorney look it over for you, and sign it if you want to. I'll only stay in this marriage if I'm sure you're willing to sacrifice something for it. How long do I have to decide? She asked. Until Saturday morning, I said, getting up to leave. Audrey looked at the food she had prepared. Aren't you going to eat? I bought your favorite. After everything you've done and all the lies you've told me, should I expect the sauce to be extra fresh? I shot back, watching as she began sobbing. Sign the post-nup if you want to regain even a little bit of my trust. The next day, I went to Audrey's office while she was out. I had an appointment with the office manager, an older lady who had worked there for many years. Judging by the looks I received from the staff, Audrey had been spreading her lies about me. How can I help you today? The office manager asked, clearly not pleased. There's a misconception that I'm the bad guy in my marriage. That seems like a personal matter, irrelevant to this office, she replied icily. Now, if that's all, I have a busy schedule, and I'm asking you to leave. Actually, it is relevant, because it involves my wife's affair with someone who works here, I said firmly. She stiffened at my words. Do you have any evidence to back up this accusation? Certainly, I said, showing her a photo of Audrey and her coworker. I also have dozens of recordings where they admit to using work hours to do more than just show clients' properties. I played her short clips from 2 of the recordings. She was visibly uncomfortable. Can I assume my wife will be fired immediately? Yes, along with her coworker, she responded. Unfortunately, you can't fire him, I countered. While I had permission to record my wife's conversations, I didn't have permission to record his. So none of this is admissible in court. The office manager, realizing the risk of a lawsuit, softened. Thank you for the information, she said, relieved. Can I keep the photo? No, I said firmly. I won't let it be passed around for people's curiosity at my family's expense. That afternoon, Audrey came home in tears, telling me she'd lost her job and wouldn't be receiving any references. She wanted to talk, but I told her we would speak on Saturday before going to my room and locking the door. Saturday morning, Audrey was waiting at the kitchen table. Did you have to get me fired? She asked, tearfully. When you knew I found out about the affair, you should have quit your job immediately to get away from him. I just made the right decision for you since your moral compass seems broken. We could have discussed it first, she said, pleading. I thought we had established that we were no longer making decisions together, especially ones that could have an adverse effect on our spouse or children. Speaking of which, I asked, have you signed the post-nup yet? Yes, she said, handing me the envelope. I looked it over, confirming it was signed and dated, then sent an electronic copy to my lawyer and placed the physical copy in my safe. I explained the new rules. Her best behavior was expected. We'd go to counseling, and I would inform the family that we were trying to reconcile. Deep down, I knew this wouldn't last. I didn't even bother scheduling counseling. For the next 30 days, Audrey was the perfect wife, loving and attentive. She even took the initiative to spy on me, installing a small camera in my office to monitor what I typed and viewed on my screen. I caught Audrey installing a hidden camera in my office, which I only monitored from my laptop in the car away from the house. On Saturday morning, I came down to the kitchen and saw Audrey sitting at the table, sipping coffee and looking pleased with herself. We exchanged pleasantries. I got my coffee and sat down across from her. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "I took them over to my parents," she replied. "Why?" I was frustrated. "We haven't been intimate in a month, and I was hoping you might change your mind." Audrey looked taken aback. 8 months. 8 months? I asked. "Yes, that's how long it's been since we were intimate." "No, it hasn't been that long." "You're wrong," she said, clearly confused. "I understand how you could be confused given everything that's happened, but I'm the one who hasn't been intimate for 8 months. "I am not wrong, Audrey." "Well, we could change that," she said, trying to be seductive. I waved her off. "Audrey, I still haven't forgotten what you've done or what you've said. I certainly haven't been able to erase those images from my mind. It's not going to happen." "All right then, be hard-headed. I've tried to be accommodating. I've done everything you've asked, and yet you and the kids still treat me like some sort of outcast. I want you all to start respecting me more, starting now. Is this really how you want to handle this, Audrey?" I asked. "Yes," she said defiantly. "I don't like being blackmailed with your videos. I've done something about it. I deleted all the copies you had. You made a mistake when you admitted to keeping copies. I even deleted your cloud backups and destroyed your thumb drive. I was unfazed. I've been watching you. You're so predictable. I'm tired of being treated like a pariah in my own home. I'll be staying with my sister until you come to your senses and start treating me with more respect. Without the pictures to hold over my head, I'm moving on. I've found another job and will be taking care of myself. I'll pick up the kids from school and have dinner with them at my new place until you start treating me better." Audrey stood up and walked towards the front door. Her sister emerged from the dining room, and they left together. For the next 2 months, Audrey worked on convincing her parents and the kids that I was the problem. She claimed I had fabricated the evidence, saying the heavily redacted photo was photoshopped and that I should show them the real proof if I had it. She told them I had manipulated everything, but she had deleted all the evidence. The kids were confused, and her parents wanted to believe her. I even saw some doubt in my parents' eyes, not that they didn't trust me, but because they could see I was losing the kids' trust. My brother and his wife, who had seen the videos, were completely on my side. Despite this, I felt like a pariah. I arranged another meeting with Douche. This time, I pulled out all the stops. I rented a beachfront hotel room in Florida, hired 3 well-endowed male escorts. 3 was overkill, but I wanted to be prepared, and bought 2 first-class tickets for Audrey and Douche. I also offered Douche $5,000 for the video, specifying it had to be recorded on the hotel suite balcony. Douche asked for more money to take Audrey out to an expensive restaurant, which I reluctantly agreed to, knowing he was milking me. During the meal, Douche and Audrey, along with Karen, chatted excitedly about their plans. Karen revealed she had covered for Audrey for years and had even covered for Douche when he was involved with Audrey. She mentioned how Audrey had to stop seeing Douche after someone tipped off her husband. 2 weeks later, I watched the latest video from my car. The video began with Audrey, Karen, Douche, and the 3 escorts walking onto the balcony. They were all already sweaty. Karen talked about Audrey's affair and how Douche had been with her. One of the escorts joked about Douche's size compared to the others, and they all laughed, except Douche. Douche started with Karen, then went inside the hotel room, emerging later with the other 3 escorts, who took little blue pills. Soon, all 4 men were aroused. The video showed Audrey being intimate with all 4 men over the next 2 hours, with Karen acting as a fluffer, unaware of the full extent of what was happening. After watching the video, I praised Douche for his work. I encrypted the video and uploaded it to the cloud, then encrypted the copies on the thumb drive before putting it in my pocket. I closed my laptop, put it in my briefcase, and drove away from the rest stop. Douche asked for his payment, but I told him I had a few questions first. "Did you approach my wife first?" I asked. "Not really. It just kind of happened, working together and all." "Who mentioned sex first?" "Actually, she did. I was turning onto a 2-lane road, heading back to town." "Really? How many women have you been with around town?" "Well, I've only been here a couple of years, but I've been with 7 women." "Who are they?" "I can't tell you that. It wouldn't be right." "I'll give you another $1,000, make it 2, if you include where and roughly when," I said. He named all 7, the office manager, 2 other women from the office, and 4 from a couple of gyms he worked out at. All were married. I turned off the recorder in my pocket and said, "Wow, that's crazy. Want to see something else that's crazy?" I pushed hard on the accelerator, and the car lurched to 70 miles per hour quickly. Douche said, "Hey man, what are you doing?" "I don't need to see anything crazy." "Sorry, that wasn't the crazy part." "This is," I said, aiming the car toward the trees and slamming on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop under 40 miles per hour when we hit the tree. The airbags deployed, and while we were both saved, it hurt a lot. I regained my senses first. Douche was still groggy. I reached over, pulled a pencil from the ashtray, and jammed it into his jugular. The bleeding wasn't as severe as I expected, so I twisted the pencil around, doing as much damage as possible. Douche stared at me in shock, trying to grab the bloody pencil. I let go, and he pulled it out, trying to stop the bleeding. The blood spurted from his neck as he stared at me, and I stared back, my actions speaking louder than words. Afterward, I wiped the blood off the pencil, wrapped Douche's bloody hand around it to avoid leaving fingerprints, and took $500 from my front pocket and placed it into his pants pocket. I called the police to report the accident. They later ruled it as an accidental death. I mentioned that Douche had been holding the pencil before the accident. The police confiscated my laptop and thumb drive as evidence. After a checkup at the hospital, I went home, sore for a week. I explained the blood on my shirt as a result of the accident, not specifying whose blood it was, and said someone had died. I didn't call them immediately because I didn't want to worry them or explain why I was in the car with Audrey's lover. When Audrey heard about Douche's death, she connected the dots and called me, probing about his death. I played ignorant. The following day, the police visited and questioned me about Douche and my wife's affair. I admitted to knowing about the affair, and that's why I was in the car with Douche. I had given him money to stay away from my wife, but he was asking for more, and then the accident happened. The police tried to pressure me, so I finally said, "Are you suggesting I intentionally ran my car at high speed into a tree, hoping only Douche would die?" It was pretty unlucky for him that the pencil went into his jugular. "Hey, it's not my fault he was unlucky." The police left, noting that I had both opportunity and motivation, but my fingerprints weren't on the pencil. Plus, who would risk their life by crashing into a tree at high speed to kill someone else? How could they prove that in court? A few days later, Audrey called, wanting to meet to discuss our marriage. She insisted on neutral ground, with her sister accompanying her because she didn't feel safe alone with me. I asked her what she had in mind. She suggested a hotel, saying the house was out of the question and she didn't want the conversation recorded. I agreed, but insisted on picking the room to ensure neither of us could record the conversation. I started to ponder Audrey's real objective. She could have easily met me at the house like before, but she definitely did not want me recording what was going to happen. We met the following Saturday afternoon. I followed Audrey and Karen's car to a nice hotel across town. When we arrived and checked in, the hotel attendant gave us room 216. I asked for a higher room with a view of the front of the hotel. After the attendant named several rooms, I picked one. Audrey and Karen were obviously disappointed. They would need to pay again to retrieve their recording equipment from room 216. Karen stood next to me, put her arm around my waist, and pressed against me, saying, "No matter how this works out, I hope we can still remain friends." I told her this discussion was between my wife and me, and I preferred she did not get involved. Karen was likely the only person who had flirted with me openly for years without crossing boundaries. Audrey, who normally did not trust her sister around me, had changed her stance. I wasn't complaining. The hotel room was standard, an office desk with a chair in one corner, a dresser along the wall, and a queen-sized bed in the other corner. Audrey asked, "What now?" I smiled and said, "Strip completely naked." "I don't trust you, and you don't trust me." Audrey looked at Karen. "She's my sister. I don't want you seeing her naked." "Oh please, she doesn't have anything most people in town haven't already seen," I replied. Karen stuck out her tongue, revealing a tongue stud in the middle. Audrey relented, and they began undressing. I quickly removed my clothes, neatly piling them on the desk, with my back to them. I slipped a pin from my pants pocket and placed it behind my clothes on the desk. It matched the other hotel pin, with no visible difference, but this one had a camera hidden inside. I had prepared these in advance by hollowing out each pin slightly to fit a tiny camera. I walked to the bathroom, placed my clothes inside, and kept an eye on Audrey and Karen. I then returned to the desk chair and sat down naked. Audrey and Karen sat on the bed in their bras and panties with their clothes beside them. "Karen, please put the clothes in the bathroom," I instructed. When Karen returned and sat down, I said, "All right, you two, lose the underwear." "Audrey, this is good enough." Karen, acting indignant, protested, "I'm not standing here while you stare at my privates." "Fine. You can stand outside while Audrey and I have our discussion," I replied. Audrey, visibly annoyed, knew this would complicate her plan. She gave Karen a knowing look, and Karen reluctantly removed her bra and panties, then sat on the bed. "Not good enough, Karen. Stand up and bend over," I ordered. Karen looked at Audrey, who nodded. Karen complied, and to my surprise, there was a recorder taped to the inside of her but cracked with a tiny mic hanging out at the top. Audrey had anticipated I would make them strip and hoped the underwear would stay on. I walked over and ripped the tape off. Karen yelped and turned around, sitting on the bed, her face slightly flushed. Was she ashamed or aroused? Knowing Karen, it was likely the latter. "Audrey, you're next," I said. Audrey stood up, and I found the second recorder. I grabbed the tape from the bottom, making sure to apply pressure. After struggling with the tape and inadvertently pressing into her, I finally ripped it off. Audrey turned around and sat on the bed, her chest flushed, indicating some level of arousal. I then stepped between Audrey's legs and ran my fingers through her hair, searching for any hidden recorders. I found one attached with a bobby pin. I threw it into the pile with the others and said, "Audrey, these look expensive." When I was checking Karen's hair, she shifted to the edge of the bed and wrapped her legs around mine. I took my time going through her hair while trying to maintain my composure. I noticed Audrey's smirk, which seemed to confirm my suspicion about why we were there. Audrey should have been upset, considering the situation, but instead, she seemed amused. I took the last recorder from Karen's hair and handed the pile to Audrey, asking her to throw them into the bathroom and shut the door. As Audrey turned away, Karen leaned in, trying to be more intimate with me. I stepped back and took a seat as Audrey tossed the recorders into the bathroom and closed the door. The tension in the room was palpable. If Audrey's plan was to make me lose my focus, it seemed to be working. Audrey then motioned for Karen to take her turn. I stood up and adjusted my position as instructed. Audrey and Karen continued with their plan, and I went to the bathroom door, stuffing a towel under it to block any gaps and hopefully irritate Audrey further. I returned to my chair, trying to refocus. "All right, now that we've handled that, let's move on," I said, trying to avoid looking at Karen's appearance. Audrey responded, "Don't be like that." I was hoping we could have a serious conversation soon to clarify what this meeting was really about. Karen was still sitting on the bed, her posture making it clear she was relaxed, though I had seen her in a string bikini before and had to make an effort not to stare. Karen had an impressive figure, and it didn't help that she was openly watching me. Audrey, in her sweetest tone, said, "I love you, honey." just like your favorite pair of shoes. I responded, you know that's not true. I really do love you, as long as your credit card works. Audrey's voice rose slightly, don't be so grumpy. Our marriage is strong enough to withstand this. I replied, strong? You've used whatever strength we had to repeatedly hurt me. You want me to forgive you again? Audrey continued, it was a mistake. I still love you. Take me here on this bed and make me yours again. I shot back, you think you're still a prize? You proved yourself to be easily available. As soon as I mentioned this, Audrey sat up and crossed her legs, while Karen remained unfazed, smiling and making her position more open. Don't be like that, Karen said, it was just a simple mistake. I countered, it wasn't a simple mistake. It was a deliberate plan. In a high-pitched voice, I added, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would hurt you. I didn't mean to cause you pain. I paused, I'm sorry I lied, but it was because I was ashamed of what I was doing. I stopped lying when you confronted me and I realized the gravity of my mistakes. Oh, you mean when I first told you I knew, and you said there must be a mistake, that someone misunderstood what they saw? Or the second time when you claimed it was just a misunderstanding? Yes, I had an affair, but it was only emotional. Or the third time when you said it was just a couple of kisses? Or when you told your friends to convince me to take you back because it was a one-time mistake? I think you only decided to be honest when I showed you the evidence. You stopped lying when you knew the truth would come out, but that won't stop you from lying about other things, will it? Karen, noticing her sister's subdued reaction, remarked, we don't want anyone to overreact and say something they might regret later. Surprised, I responded, overreact? Are you kidding me? I think you're underreacting. It always amazes me how cheaters try to minimize the impact of their actions. How many partners have you cheated on, Karen? How many married people have you been involved with? Karen just stared at me, maintaining a smirk. Audrey, in a meek voice, said, but I feel very sorry for what I've put you through. Oh, you feel really guilty, so all should be forgiven. Unfortunately, I think you don't feel guilty enough. My plan is to help you with that shortcoming, I said. Audrey, in a pitiful little girl voice, replied, it's not that bad. Tell me, dearest, what's the difference between what you are now and a con artist? You know, a con artist, someone who gains someone's trust and then uses that trust to swindle them. I responded, I didn't swindle you. Marriage is a deal of faithfulness and trust. You violated that trust and lied to me. How is that not swindling? I kept up my end of the bargain. With a little more force in my voice, I continued, it was only about sex, so that's why you hid it from me all this time? It was only sex, and you knew I might get upset about it, like the time you forgot to buy orange juice from the grocery store. Louder, with an accusatory tone, I said, making me sign that post-nup was unfair. If I get a driving ticket, I get a fine. If I don't pay my taxes, they confiscate my money. If I drink too much and walk around in public, they put me in jail for the night. But adultery? What happens? Children's lives are ruined because of this. People are driven to murder or suicide over it. If life were fair, marriage licenses would be contracts where adulterers face jail time, lose 75% of their assets in a divorce, and face maximum sentences if they're single. Marriage is about raising a family and being faithful to one person. Otherwise, what's the point? Audrey stared at me, unable to answer. Audrey, do you know how many marriages last more than a few years that start out with infidelity? 5%. That's the same percentage as open marriages. Was that your plan, Audrey? Divorce me, marry him, and be in an open marriage? Guess we'll never know, will we? He's dead. Audrey's face twisted into an ugly expression, and she had an evil glint in her eye. All right, screw you. I've deleted all your evidence, so you have nothing to hold over me anymore. We've both been hurt, and now my parents and our kids don't know who to believe. Was it worth it? Was it worth destroying your marriage over this? Pointing at myself, I said loudly, I didn't kill this marriage. You killed it. I'm just declaring the time of death. Audrey was shocked. She still thought our marital problems were my fault for catching her and being unreasonable. Angry, she said, maybe I wouldn't have had an affair if you'd paid more attention to me. Why would I? I shot back. You were paying zero attention to me. That seemed to take the wind out of Audrey. We sat quietly for a minute, staring at each other. Karen, seeming to ignore our conversation, just stared at my tool. Did you kill him? Audrey asked, her voice trembling. With my back to the pin camera, I smiled broadly and answered, it was an unfortunate accident. How could you do something like that? Audrey demanded, trying to elicit an emotional apology or moral justification for my actions. I avoided both, as either could be seen as an admission of guilt. Instead, I replied, after we hit the tree, you should have seen the look on his face when he was bleeding out. Audrey looked like I had slapped her. I pointed at her face and chuckled. Yeah, that's it. Just act like your throat's been choked and you can't breathe. Or like you're having lunch with your coworkers. Her eyes started to water. He was a good guy. I let my anger creep into my voice. Oh, you mean those good guys who mess with other people's marriages? Too bad he died. Wasn't he up for Humanitarian of the Year in the category of wife stealer? You didn't have to kill him, Audrey half yelled, now visibly crying. Are you upset that life is not fair? I asked. If life were fair, he would have been in jail a year or two and not been in that car with me that night. But no, our legal system turns a blind eye to adultery, so he would have walked away, scot-free, after ruining my marriage and my family's happiness. So, to me, he got exactly what he deserved. Karma. Audrey, tearfully, said, but you still love me. I know you do. Correction, I replied, I used to love you. True love is a privilege most people never get to experience, even if they marry. You had it from me for a moment in your life, and all I got back was your lust for a wedding, your lust for a husband, your lust for my money, and your lust for my faithfulness. You threw away love for something as petty as lust because you never knew what true love was. Millions of guys will use you for lust. You're damaged goods now. No man will truly love you like I did after what you've done to your family and me. Tears streamed down Audrey's face. This definitely hadn't gone as she had planned. But I had to hand it to her, she regained her composure and got back on plan. The look in Audrey's eyes changed as her mind was spinning. For her next move, Audrey sat up straight, wiped her eyes, and said, I want a drink. Anyone else want one? I'm going to the bar and then I'll be back. Hopefully, we can discuss this like adults. Audrey then got up, went into the bathroom, got dressed, and left the room. As Audrey mentioned the death of her sister's partner and the conversation heated up, Karen, still oblivious to our conversation, began to indulge in her own pleasure. The room was filled with the strong smell of Karen's actions, and I couldn't help but notice how her physical appearance was striking, her toned body and flat stomach. I knew Audrey had seen what her sister was doing but chose not to acknowledge it. Karen, now very focused on her own desires, commented, Your body looks tempting. Audrey told me she hasn't been intimate with you in a year, and you have such a nice physique. I said, I appreciate the offer, but Audrey will be back soon. Karen responded, what she doesn't know won't hurt her, and pulled me from my chair. Despite my internal struggle to stop her, Karen began to engage with me. However, Audrey returned sooner than expected, holding her phone up. She entered the room just as Karen was trying to pull me onto the bed, yelling, Please stop. The door flew open, and Audrey charged in, confronting Karen and me. What are you doing to my sister? Audrey demanded. He's assaulting me, make him stop. Audrey then pushed me away from Karen and pulled her sister from underneath me. She smiled at me, dropped her phone on the carpet, and hit end on the video recording. She made a few more clicks, presumably sending the video to the cloud. Well, now you've done it, Audrey said. I have you on video attempting to assault my sister. Thank God I came back in time to save her. Audrey and Karen laughed, and I sat back down in my chair, feeling defeated. Audrey continued, Here's how the divorce is going to go. There will be no more postnup. If you mention it, I'll have you jailed for assault. You're only getting this chance for the kid's sake. Second, I want 90% of everything, and you will pay all legal expenses. I'll have full custody of the kids, 50% child support, and 20% alimony for life. If you don't agree, my sister, this tape, and I will see you in court, and you'll go to jail for assault. Do you understand? I acknowledged, yes. Audrey's final plan was evidently her main objective. Good. You can be with my sister now if you want. Flirting with you has made her quite eager. Audrey then gave Karen a hard slap on the behind. No thanks, I replied. I don't want to give you any more evidence for your claims. Audrey and Karen attempted to kiss me, but I turned away. Karen quickly dressed and left, saying, "Come on, Audrey. Let's go find some men who are more up for it. I know some guys who are always looking for a good time." Moments earlier, Audrey had been crying over our lost love, and now she was leaving with her sister, both laughing at me. I thought to myself, I've seen behind your mask, and I don't like what I've seen. I watched them drive away, then dressed and left the hotel. The meeting had gone better than I had hoped, though it was close. I lacked the willpower to stop Karen from her actions, and if she hadn't stopped on her own, Audrey would have had a video of me and her sister that could have seriously complicated my plans. The next day, Audrey was served with divorce papers, and the post-nup was to be fully enforced. When Audrey called and threatened me with her tape, I informed her, "You didn't delete everything, and I never showed you everything I have. If you accuse me of assault, I'll be a free man the next day, and you'll be sitting in jail." Audrey was a smart woman, and by this point, there were too many uncertainties for her to use her hotel meeting video. I knew she would wait and see before revealing her strongest evidence. We both hired lawyers. I remained firm on my demands based on the post-nup. I provided my lawyer with transcripts of all my pre- and post-nup recordings. My lawyer notified Audrey's attorney that due to unforeseen circumstances, we were in the process of recovering the recordings Audrey had deleted and only had the transcripts at that time. We went back and forth with the lawyer negotiations. I didn't mind, as I planned for Audrey to cover the entire bill. Audrey also had an expensive lawyer, obviously expecting me to foot the entire cost. Eventually, the lawyers gave up and scheduled a court date. The issues were whether the post-nup was enforceable and if I had any actual recordings. A few days before the divorce trial, I had a special courier deliver certified letters to Audrey and Karen at Karen's place. The letter was a convincing fake, purportedly from the Center for Disease Control. It informed Audrey and Karen that shortly before his death, Douche had come into contact with someone who had full-blown AIDS, and the test results confirmed he had contracted the disease. The letter instructed Audrey to consult a doctor immediately and noted that a CDC representative would contact her to obtain a list of all her sexual partners over the past year. It also stated she was not to engage in any sexual activity for the next 12 months until it was confirmed she had not contracted the disease. The situation with Douche being deceased proved convenient for my plans. I wanted Audrey as stressed as possible. On court day, the judge was displeased with both of us. Audrey pleaded her innocence, claiming she had not breached the post-nup agreement. She argued that the post-nup had been signed under duress and that she had never committed adultery. She had been so afraid of losing her children and husband that she signed the agreement without reading it or seeking legal counsel. She was terrified of the transcripts, believing they were admissible in court. In other words, she claimed I had tricked her. She cried convincingly while her lawyer spoke. I, on the other hand, asserted that the post-nup was created because Audrey was an adulterer. She signed it only under the threat of divorce and had violated the agreement. I argued that she was an unfit mother and that the post-nup was just a reflection of her actions. The judge asked, "What evidence do you have that she committed adultery?" My lawyer produced the video and voice recordings to support the transcripts we had previously provided. The judge inquired why we were presenting the video and voice recordings only now. We explained that we had only recently managed to obtain the video and voice recordings after a lengthy process. Although we had the original transcripts, Audrey had deleted the original recordings. Recovering the data through certified means had been time-consuming, and we had just received the evidence at the courthouse. We also had tape evidence of Audrey admitting to deleting the recordings. I had deliberately baited Audrey into deleting my recordings. After she installed a camera in my office, I updated a recording and saved it to multiple locations, including a thumb drive on my desk. Audrey believed she knew where I kept all my copies. After Audrey deleted my copies, I worked hard to make her believe she had erased everything and that I was now helpless. It was paying off. Judges generally disapprove of parties who knowingly delete evidence. Audrey had also misled the judge, claiming she had never cheated and that I had no evidence. This was not a good start for her. The judge addressed Audrey's lawyer. "Do the transcripts match the recordings?" "Yes, Your Honor," replied Audrey's lawyer. "Do you wish to challenge the authenticity of the recordings?" The lawyer glanced at Audrey, who slightly shook her head. "No, Your Honor." That answers the question on the validity of the post-nup existence and invalidates any claim of duress in signing it. However, I notice all these recordings occurred before the post-nup was signed. None of these are evidence of adultery after the signing. "Yes, Your Honor." Here is the transcript of the final video and the video itself, which proves Audrey's adultery after the post-nup was signed. Why is this being produced only now? Until recently, this evidence was in police custody as part of an accidental death investigation. We were unsure if the video still existed until it was returned to my client. The judge turned to Audrey's lawyer. "Have you had a chance to review the video?" "Yes, Your Honor, but we believe the video is inadmissible due to the lack of a consent form. Additionally, if the video is allowed, there's no evidence proving it wasn't recorded before the post-nup was signed." My attorney responded, "First, the video was taken on a public balcony, where there's no expectation of privacy, so no consent form is required. Second, we can prove the time and date of the event as being after the post-nup was signed." The judge inquired, "How is that simple?" "My client paid for the plane tickets and hotel room used for their secret rendezvous," I explained. This might have drawn some attention. "Did you consent to your wife's affair?" the judge asked. "She never asked my permission," I replied. "I neither consented to nor condoned her actions." "Then why did you pay for their plane tickets and hotel room?" I confronted Douche before the video and asked how much money it would take for him to stop seeing my wife. He mentioned he could lose his job. Douche said $2,000, a couple of tickets to Jamaica, and a 3-night stay in a 5-star hotel. We agreed, and I purchased vouchers for the tickets and hotel. Douche went back on his word and used the vouchers for a trip to Florida. I received the receipts the following week after my wife was out of town for a conference. It was convenient that Douche is now deceased, the judge noted. "How do we know this is the hotel?" the judge asked. "In the first picture, you can see the hotel sign in the background. I paid for the video. Douche sold it to me the night he died. I have a signed receipt to prove it." Was this unusual? No. Once I discovered my wife's affairs, I asked Douche for evidence. He was accommodating and provided visual proof. "Was Douche aware you were gathering this evidence?" "Yes. Months ago, I explained that it would be easier and less costly to get the evidence directly from him instead of hiring a private investigator. I eventually paid him to stop his involvement with my wife. Douche even called me to offer another video, which I bought for $500. He was aware of the post-nup from Audrey. As evidenced by the video showing Audrey with multiple men, including her sister, I added, pointing at Karen. Audrey has broken the post-nup agreement. If needed, Karen can testify to the authenticity and date of the video. Everyone in the courtroom turned to look at Karen. I realized that my earlier comments had struck a nerve. The judge reprimanded me for using inappropriate language, and I offered an apology. The judge then asked, "Is that all you received from Douche that night?" He stared directly into Audrey's eyes. "That is all from that night," I replied. However, he provided me with most of the recordings you have here today. He had been doing this for months, including the hotel and flight costs. I paid him around $3,000 in total. Audrey looked visibly distressed, her frustration evident. My testimony about Douche made her appear to have been outwitted. It seemed that while she was involved with Douche, he had been recording their interactions and selling the footage to me. For a mere $33,000, Audrey would have paid much more to avoid these revelations. It was fortunate for me that Douche was no longer alive. Despite her anger, I could see Audrey calculating that I must have obtained all the available footage. She reasoned that if Douche had more evidence, he would have already produced it. Audrey quickly made a decision and began whispering to her attorney. Her attorney requested a brief recess, which the judge granted since it was close to lunchtime. Upon our return, Audrey's attorney announced that he had received a video showing me committing a serious crime that reflected poorly on my character. This video allegedly depicted an adulterous act, which was enforceable under the post-nup. Audrey and Karen were prepared to attest to the video's authenticity. The judge had Audrey and Karen verbally confirm the authenticity of the video. Audrey then explained, "Until this moment, my sister and I were reluctant to put the father of my children in prison. However, now that I understand how manipulative he is, I must do what is right." They played the video, which started by showing the hotel door and someone yelling, "Please stop." Then Audrey burst into the room, revealing me on top of Karen. Audrey shouted, "What are you doing to my sister?" Karen cried out, "He's assaulting me, make him stop." The video ended with Audrey grabbing her sister's phone, which fell to the carpet. Unfortunately, the video also showed some compromising positions between me and Karen. The judge asked, "What happened next?" I locked myself in the bathroom and told my husband that if he didn't leave the room within 2 minutes, I would call the police. I also informed him that I had already uploaded the video to the cloud to prevent him from accessing it. "Did he leave?" the judge inquired. "Yes," I responded. I was now in a difficult position. I glanced at Audrey's parents, who looked at me with disapproval. Fortunately, my parents were at home with our children. I felt a pang of sympathy for Audrey's parents, who had just learned unsettling details about their daughter. They now believed that the father of their grandchildren was involved in unacceptable behavior. The judge looked at me and asked, "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" My lawyer responded, "We have a rebuttal video." Audrey's lawyer jumped out of his seat, attempting to discredit the video before it was shown. "So let me get this straight," the judge said. "You're allowed to present your surprise video of the hotel meeting, but we are not permitted to see their surprise rebuttal video of the same meeting?" The judge chuckled, and Audrey's lawyer quietly took his seat. Audrey's face turned pale. I could almost hear her thoughts, as if they were written on her forehead. It must be a poor quality recording from the bathroom. The video started with us discussing getting undressed due to the recorders and ended with Audrey and Karen laughing as they exited the room. During the video, I mentioned how our justice system fails to adequately support marriages, and I noticed the judge's sympathetic expression. It seemed he too might have been a victim of a broken marriage or was simply acknowledging the deficiencies in the justice system. As the video played, Audrey's excitement over my alleged involvement in Dush's death was evident. She leaned in to whisper to her lawyer, who then shook his head, signaling that the accusations might not hold. Before presenting the video, my lawyer confirmed that I had not admitted to any wrongdoing in my statements. Audrey's initial strategy to manipulate me into forgiving her and incriminate myself was unraveling. Her plan backfired as the video exposed her deceptive tactics. Karen tried to sneak out when the video showed her in a compromising situation, but the bailiff intervened. Audrey displayed genuine shame when the video revealed her actions. The reaction from her parents, who left the courtroom before the video concluded, indicated they had seen enough. Audrey knew that their support was gone. After the video, the judge decided the post-nup would be enforced as written. My lawyer informed the court about Audrey's secret bank account, which she had failed to disclose. This account held more than all our other assets combined. Audrey had been diverting funds into this account, including equity from our house through a second mortgage. I had discovered this account early on, using monitoring software. The hidden funds and the second mortgage transfer were my maneuvers to uncover Audrey's deceit. The judge, using his discretion, awarded me 100% of the assets and ruled that Audrey would bear all attorney fees and court costs. In the end, I received 95% of the assets, full custody of the children, the house, 2 of the 3 cars, child support for a few years, and alimony for 5 years. Audrey's life unraveled dramatically after the affair came to light. She faced 90 days in jail, lost her secret bank account, and was betrayed by her affair partner, who turned out to be a deadbeat. She lost her children's trust, was forced to pay 50% of their college expenses, and saw her career and relationship with her parents deteriorate. The small fraction of assets she retained didn't even cover half of her legal and court fees. She did manage to get her clothes, her car, and her jewelry, but I had sold all her expensive jewelry shortly after discovering her affair. At that time, we were still together, and I had stored the jewelry in a safe. Once I learned of the affair, I stopped taking Audrey to nice places, so she never noticed the missing items. She couldn't prove I had sold them, and I claimed she had sold them and was trying to blame me. With the money from the jewelry and the car accident settlement, I bought my dream car. The money saved from the jewelry was intended to be combined with the car accident settlement, which I hoped would cover my funeral costs if I didn't receive the settlement due to the accident. When Audrey went to jail, I informed the facility of suspected HIV exposure involving her and her sister. I provided the court with copies of their CDC letters. Upon their release, both Audrey and Karen were bald, a result of the rumors circulating about their supposed HIV status. The rumor was that Karen had been involved with another person's intimate area, leading to both sisters being treated as property by others during their incarceration. This public humiliation took its toll on Audrey, who seemed diminished by the experience. The HIV rumors persisted for nearly 2 years, during which Audrey and Karen both lost a significant amount of weight and began smoking. The label of HIV sisters became well known in town, and their appearance deteriorated, making them look significantly older. Audrey struggled to maintain a relationship with her children, who faced teasing and eventual shunning due to the rumors about their mother. With her reputation in tatters, good job opportunities were scarce, forcing her to commute to work in a distant town. Her efforts to stay close to her children were in vain, as they resented her and were embarrassed by her. As Audrey and Karen's prospects dwindled, they turned to relationships with men who used hard drugs and were willing to share their partners. This lifestyle further impacted their appearance. Audrey lost her job in real estate, as no one wanted to buy houses from someone who looked increasingly disheveled. Eventually, Audrey and Karen's only job options were as bar waitresses or strippers. They moved in with a man 14 years older than Audrey, a registered sex offender with a history of multiple divorces and estranged children. Known for his preference for bar workers and strippers, he traveled frequently, and both Audrey and Karen engaged in relationships with other people to make extra money while he was away. Additionally, I sent recordings of Dutch's last words to the husbands of Audrey's ex-boss and the matronly lady who had once threatened to call the police on me, and who had boasted to Audrey about Dutch's reputation. I personally played the recording for her husband and then detailed all the things Dutch had bragged about regarding other men's wives. I also showed him a video where Audrey explained her years of covering for her boss every Thursday at office parties. I knew he had actually owned the real estate agency even before their marriage. As he was leaving, he thanked me for Dutch's death and with a sly grin, remarked on my driving skills. He mentioned that he intended to use the prenup to make things difficult for Audrey. Occasionally, I received drunken messages, usually from Audrey, telling me how good I had it and what I was missing out on, all while she is involved with other partners. Audrey and her associates sometimes sent taunts, enticements, or threats, and on rare occasions, videos of their encounters, with Karen filming and providing commentary. Karen seems to believe that these videos will either degrade me or provoke me to try to win Audrey back. However, these attempts have only confirmed that I no longer have any desire for either of them. Sometimes, Audrey's messages and videos are followed by her expressing anger, blaming me for her circumstances, or wishing I were dead. More often, they include her crying, professing that I am the love of her life, begging for forgiveness, and hoping for reconciliation. I keep every message and video, preparing in case Audrey tries to re-enter our children's lives. I've accepted that Audrey never truly loved me as I loved her. To her, life is measured by what she can take, not by what she can give. I have a restraining order against both Audrey and her sister, as I believe they may still harbor resentment towards me. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.